Thank you. So at this time, I'd like to call to order the meeting of the Finance Committee of the City Council of Palo Alto for Tuesday, May 30th, 2023. Would the clerk please call roll?
Chair Burt. Councilmember Lifcott Haynes. Here. Vice Chair Stone. Yep. 3 present. Thank you.
Thank you. So our first item today is public comment on any items that are not otherwise on the agenda. And do we have any speakers?
We have one request to speak.
Ken Horowitz, welcome.
Yeah, good evening. Just real quick, I wanted to follow up on your study session you had several weeks ago regarding the Cubberley and acquisition. Just want to give you two interesting facts. Number one, I checked out the site. I think the mayor asked what is the size of the Jewish community center over there on Charleston. And it's 8.4 acres, which isn't that much different than what you own already at Cubberley, 8 acres. So I wanted to share that with you. And the other fact that I found interesting from a meeting I attended recently, Palo Alto Unified School District, the current enrollment in their K through 12 is now 10,300, sorry. It used to be in 2017, 12,300. They're down 2,000 students, which is approximately 60% in their enrollment K through 12 in the last 5 years. So I want to share that with you. Thank you very much for your time.
Thanks.
Thank you. So that concludes our public comments, and we can now go to our single agenda item tonight, which is a discussion of the fiscal year 2024 budget wrap-up and recommended FY24 budget, including the FY24 municipal fee schedule for City Council adoption. So, Ms. Jose, you're going to kick it off?
Sure. Thank you, Chair Burt, and good evening, Finance Committee. Kylie Jose, Administrative Services Director, and we will actually turn it over for a brief presentation to Jessie Deschamps from our Office of Management and Budget.
Thank you and good evening. Next slide, please. Okay, that's okay. Part of the review tonight, we will discuss City Council feedback to reduce adjustments by 1 million, staff recommendations to achieve those savings, and potential referrals from staff or to staff. So at the conclusion of the meeting, the Finance Committee will recommend final adjustments for budget adoption. Next slide. So looking at the full schedule, we are nearing the end of the budget process. Tonight is the budget wrap-up and last meeting for City Council adoption on June 19th. Next slide. This slide recaps the Finance Committee tentative adjustments as shared with the City Council on May 22nd. Overall, these adjustments add 9 million in revenues and 7.8 million expense above the proposed budget levels. Next slide. At the May 22nd meeting, the City Council recommended reducing adjustments on the prior slide by 1 million. This slide reflects staff's recommendation to achieve those savings. Overall, this list reduces or delays spending based on factors such as staff capacity and expected timeline to implement. All proposals included in this list will be considered for investment in each year. Of note, the administrative support has been reduced to align with these new recommendations. Also, staff has assumed saving for hiring delays that are expected due to higher levels of investment. Next slide. Here we have a list of potential referrals to staff. This includes consideration to pay SRAP funding to a benchmark, review of the coordinated area plans process, and potential fee subsidy for SCAP. Staff expects to bring forward the last 2 recommendations in future reporting. Therefore, a formal referral isn't needed. Next slide. And then lastly, we have the draft motion to the City Council, which will include adoption of the operating and capital budget and municipal fee schedule, recommended staff referrals, and approval of the capital improvement plan. And so as part of this motion this evening, staff will note any changes from the Finance Committee's recommendations on slide 4 as adjusted by staff on slide 5 or approved in the wrap-up discussion. And that concludes our presentation.
Okay. So we had at the council meeting a number of straw votes. The staff have a summary of those so that we can build off of that?
I think the only straw votes that were officially taken was actually incorporated into staff's work. We would do $1 million of reductions, and so that's staff's brought that forward. And then there was another kind of question about the gas transfer at the 15.5 versus 18%, but ultimately the council had decided to kind of drop that topic. So the only official kind of straw vote with direction was the $1 million.
That may be the most substantive, but I thought we took more straw votes than that.
Well, I think maybe the middle ground here is I feel that all the items ended up on here were topics that had been raised, potential budget items that had been raised as things that we could potentially cut if we were trying to find the sayings that was recommended by Councilmember Lowing. I'm just not, I'm not recalling specifics more than that.
That's why I was trying to review it. So we had a combination of comments by council members, then we had a certain number of straw votes. And I just want to make sure that we as a committee are being very conscious of straw votes that were taken by the council, in addition to the various comments. So during our discussion, if staff can refresh that, that would be helpful. I'm guessing we don't have minutes from that meeting up yet. Okay. Okay, so who would like to kick off the discussion? Go ahead, Julie.
I'll ask a question that I believe the answer to which will send us down either path A or path B. And it is an acknowledgement of the fact that Councilmember Vice Mayor Greerstone has said repeatedly that we have a simple solution in front of us to recoup an additional $1 million by moving the gas transfer tax from 15.5% to 18% in the near term, which comes at a cost of about 60 cents per household per month. And Chair, you and I were opposed to that. We wanted to hold it at 15.5, I think, owing to the surplus we had this year, the exorbitantly high gas bills in January. I guess a matter of optics, and Karen confirmed for the community, we want to hold it this year at 15.5. I raise it because we do have a member of our committee who is encouraging us to go in that direction. It does neatly, cleanly yield the 1 million that council asked us to go back and find. Essentially, they asked us to reduce by $1 million, but of course another option is to increase revenues by $1 million, which this would do, and would mean if we went that route that we wouldn't be in this very challenging position of having to figure out which of these to kind of cut back on, push forward to the mid-year next year. So I do see it as kind of a path A or path B worth revisiting at the start of this meeting to see if there's any appetite for that. You're both elder in this work compared to me, and so I really do look to both of you for wisdom on this. And so I just want to put that there and see what you're thinking, particularly Chair, on that front.
Well, I'll kind of just add a little more context to what I had stated as my perspective previously, which is that we had made a commitment as the staff and the council that we would not be having a windfall from the big spike in gas that occurred this last winter. I know the city manager was clear on that publicly, and whether it would easily solve some of our dilemma on wanting to fund things that are on all of tier 2. I just feel that we have that, we made that commitment to the community and we need to live up to it. So that's been my perspective on it.
Yeah, thanks, and appreciate Councilmember Lithcott. Ames brings back up. I fought and died on this hill several times so far, so yeah, I'm ready to accept whatever full council wants. I don't recall doing a straw poll on this at that meeting. If staff remembers, I just remember you kind of raised the issue. I made another pitch for it, and there was no feedback on that, right? So no straw poll. So
Thank you, Councilmember Paul Harper with the Office of Management and Budget. Just go kind of over the whole straw poll question of what was said. What I remember, what I noted was that Councilmember Burt, you have a few items that you said you struggled with in terms of whether to put them on the parking lot or not. A few of the council members chimed in on a few of them. For example, that they were not comfortable or would like to keep sea level rise. Councilmember Vinker said you would like to keep that, and Mayor Gu said she'd like to keep the fire UTV and the bird safety glass. Do you want me to go down a list of the ones you said you struggled with?
Well, so I want to make sure we're distinguishing between those that we took straw polls on versus individual council members voicing opinions, which were important, but different from straw polls.
So those are the notes that I had in terms of what I was taking during the meeting. So no straw polls were taken for specific items from what I can recall.
Okay.
sorry, should I?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, so I don't recall straw poll on it, but it just didn't gain much traction. Agree with honoring the promise of the windfall, but my understanding is this transfer is from a couple of years ago, right? So I know it's optics thing, politics. Optics is of course everything. I think that is important, what the community is concerned. But at the end of the day, I think the real impact community will feel is this 1.5 million of services not being provided, and less the 60 cents or so that's being saved. So I still support this path, but yeah, I've lost this every stage so far. So we're gonna resurrect it from the dead. That'd be great, but that's where I'm at.
So I think it means that I'm the deciding vote here. And Vice Mayor, I do want you to know that I've heard you every single time you've raised it. And I'm also really clear that staff has been indicating that we've put a few too many things on the tier 2 list and have really brought the budget within a margin of discomfort for them. I find myself intuitively or emotionally drawn to the simple solution of raise more revenue and then we can spend what we want. But I think the prudent thing to do is actually to hold the revenue on the gas tax where it is at 15.5 and to do the harder work tonight of figuring out what we cannot afford to put in this budget at this time and then revisit these things at the mid-year. I'm trying to practice that more fiscal conservatism but as a matter of process, I think it's also important for members of the public to see us wrestling with these things. So I wanted to raise again in case there was unanimity on interest in moving to 18. There is not that interest, so I've raised the question for purposes of conversation. And I think where we need to go now is to hold it at the 15.5 and go through this task of figuring out how to recoup the million or to fund $1 million less than we had gone into the council meeting proposing, furtherance of what our colleagues had asked us to do, which is find $1 million in saving. Grateful to staff for putting this chart together.
So I have a few questions I can wade in with. First, if on the staff report, which is page 6 of the staff report, page 169, the last packet, we have table 2, which summarizes general fund. I think these are all meant to be revenue or, savings somehow. In any event, we have the Measure K, housing and homeless services. And for FY25 and beyond, it only lists 800,000, whereas our plan under Measure K was to have 1/3 toward housing services. So can that get explained?
Sure. So if you look on, so it would be the bottom of the table, the footnote at the end with 1 asterisk. Essentially, we're only budgeting revenue for Measure K equal to the eligible expenses that we've identified so far for those years. So it's noted at the bottom, the anticipated amount is going to increase. However, the eligible projects that have been brought forward to be spent on those is only at the 800,000 in those out years at this point.
Okay, so then we can think of those additional Measure K dollars are not allocated anywhere?
At this point, no.
Okay, and we have other affordable housing projects that are in the pipeline, which a local share will be needed. And so those would become new expenditures under capital. Yeah, okay, that helps clarify it. And then we had it's laid out in the original in the books in the attachment C of the operating budget book, which is the priority investments. And the second group is climate change and natural environment. There are 3 there that are listed with both public works and utilities. And I wanted to understand how costs are allocated there. We have $1 amount, but we don't show $2 amounts, one for utilities and one for public works. So and you may have already answered the question, but how is that?
Sure. I'll actually ask Director Eggleston he has the best, I think, knowledge of this.
Hi, Finance Committee, Brad Eggleston, Director of Public Works. I'm trying to find the specific page we're looking at or specific proposal.
Sure.
It's yeah, go ahead.
Brad, it's the $600,000 that was added under 2, which deals with the 3 studies for SHAP.
Oh, yes, that's
And
capital.
I think what the chair is asking is if you were to divide out that 600,000 amongst those 3 studies, what would that with allocation be? And I think it's I think the first 2 are 100,000 each.
Yeah, I would need to look for the details on that. If the question is about this, I thought I heard too the question of split between public works and utilities.
That's the thrust of my question.
And the fact that as presented here, these are all costs in the general fund. So beyond these costs in the general fund, the utilities department is also covering what I believe 1/2 the cost of the EV strategic plan, as well as the natural gas transition plan study, which is another one of those SCAP related studies, but is not included here. And is also covering the staff contribution of time for overseeing these studies.
So the cost of these studies is greater than 0. This is just the general fund allocation.
That's correct.
Okay. And on the natural gas transition study, is that listed? And because that one I would wonder whether that should be fully under utilities expense, and I don't see it here, so maybe that's the explanation that in fact
That is the case.
Okay, good enough. All right, so that answers that. Thank you. And one of the items that we were looking at removing as per the 1 million in savings is the eucalyptus tree removal. And I saw, Brad, I think I forwarded you one that State Farm is insuring in California, largely because of wildfire risk, and just a latest indication of what insurers are seeing as the level of risk. But when we look at this eucalyptus tree removal, that's, as I recall, is entirely in Arrastradero at the area. And either way, when I've tried to really appraise the eucalyptus trees that present a significant risk in those hills, similar to what we had in a fire in the 1980s that destroyed multiple homes and their land. We don't have a great number of eucalyptus trees on actual Arrastradero Preserve property. We have a significant number on immediately adjacent Stanford property. And if we're not going to move forward this year on the lesser issue of the eucalyptus tree removal on our own property, I'd really like to see a referral perhaps to the Stanford Ad Hoc Committee to have a discussion with Stanford about moving forward with their plan. And they have a very ramped up wildland protection plan. When we discussed it with them almost 2 years ago, I raised this issue and they were worried about the political blowback of removal of those trees. I expressed at the time that I thought that could be addressed and would support them on that. And we really haven't had any follow-up, my knowledge, since then. And so if we're going to remove this item from budget, I'd like us to make sure that we're going to attempt to move forward on a more significant land protection that is related to this. So I guess at a little later, maybe we can just have that as a referral to connected with removing this from the budget. See if colleagues support that. We have in the report the administrative costs associated with these additional tier 2 expenditures of $837,000. And one thing that we had talked about in our previous budget meetings, when it was stated that we'd need staffing for HR recruitment, and I think we have essentially 1 FTE and 2 half FTEs in this proposal. We briefly had a discussion on our current shortages in HR staff versus the authorized positions, and then the pattern that we have had of closing our unfilled positions. And so it was really a question for me, and I think my colleagues, if I remember correctly, of why do we necessarily need those additional HR recruiting positions if we were to fill the vacant positions? Would that not combine with the trend line that we already have with a understaffing, that we're closing the gap on those vacancies? Why would we need to add an additional 2 positions versus fill the vacant ones?
I believe we got Director Blanche. Yep, Sandra, thank you.
Good evening, Chair Burt and council members. Sandra Blanche, HR Director. Thank you for the opportunity to clarify the remarks from the last meeting. We do have some vacancies in human resources, one in the benefits team and one in our employee relations team. We had some recent promotions. And so because those current vacancies, and we do have posting up, because those vacancies are in different areas in HR, we were requesting an additional recruiter in support of our current overall city vacancies, as well as the additional that are coming online because of FY24 ads and the tier 2.
Well, the non-tier 2 FY24 ads were already there before we had this supplemental request. So I don't understand why there would be part of this $837K would be for the non-tier 2 additional positions. And then that goes into how many, I was trying to add how many positions we're adding in the tentative tier 2. And does that really correlate to adding 2 people in the recruitment area?
Is it an incremental 2? I thought it was.
So here, on page 178, staff report, page 15, I think is the paragraph about the HR ads. And what that describes is kind of 2 pieces of it. One is the 2 part-time positions, the 2 0.48 FTE. So those are two part-time positions that HR is currently using and funding through vacancy savings. And so if you wanted to make sure that the recruiting team was only adding in capacity as they fill vacancies, those are the two positions that you would continue. And so from a proposal standpoint and what's needed for kind of hitting the ground running with the tier 2 proposals, it would be to continue those hourlies even once those vacancies are filled, right? So you're adding capacity to that team as opposed to swapping out hourlies for full-time. The second piece of it is that staff acknowledged the feedback from the committee and the council to increase the pace at which we're trying to work through vacancies. And if that is the desire, then in order to increase that pace, the goal would be, or the recommendation from the HR team is that we would add another full-time recruiting position. So acknowledging what you've identified.
If I could add just one more component here, and this reflects discussions I've had with Dr. Blanche as well as the department directors. These positions, again, let's say in an optimistic future, we are catch up and are able to keep up with the recruiting needs. As a practical matter, as Sandra pointed out, their staff can and would be redeployed to other areas, whether they be benefits, other personnel issues, labor relations issues, and the like. I think it is fair to say that from a citywide perspective, including other departments, there is a very widespread recognition that HR is understaffed. And as such, currently, and specifically related to recruiting, we have implemented a model of distributing much of the HR responsibilities for recruiting to departments. So departments have terms liaisons or ambassadors that are actually reassigned from departments to assist in recruiting. So this would really allow us to have more of an ongoing resource in the specialties of HR.
Okay, that's helpful. I'd say that based on that explanation, we might want to refine the way in which this is described, because it was described as though being triggered by that additional adoption of the tier 2. And it sounds like this has been really based upon two factors. A need that existed and staff has opted to come forward and say, we have this need. That existed before the additional tier 2, and the additional council interest in trying to accelerate the reduction in the vacancy level. And I think just for accuracy, that would be better to describe that. I realized after the brief staff report, probably would in the right time to hear from members of the public. So why don't we take a pause and do that? And we have at least one member of the public here. Up to 2 in person. 3 is the crowd.
First speaker is Jamina Boyich.
Welcome.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to address the Financial Committee in the city of Palo Alto, and obviously just a brief introduction for the people who are not familiar with UNF, United Nations Association Film Festival. It's been in Palo Alto for the last 26 years. I founded it the STEM educator and also a strong believer that academia and community have to be together. And I'm addressing the Financial Committee because we would love to have support and continuing support of the city of Palo Alto. For the last year, we received $25,000 in support because it was 25th anniversary, but also our support from the county that we had for the 3 years ended. We received $75,000 each year from the county of Santa Clara, and this ended 2 years ago. With that, we actually request from the city of Palo Alto to help us, and they stepped in $25,000 last year. Before that, the kind of support that we had from city of Palo Alto was in kind, and with the banners of the University Avenue, and also helping us waive the fee for the Mitchell Park Community Center. which is very beneficial, of course, because that's part of the biggest budget. So the festival is 11 days. So it's one of the largest and the biggest events that Palo Alto has. It's became one of the oldest documentary film festival in the United States. So we are a great ambassador for Palo Alto. We go and present these films around the United States and around the world, and bring Palo Alto name and publicity for our city as a good ambassadors. So that's one of the things, but obviously it's much more. We engage our community from different levels, from kids to seniors. And this is not only just the film festival for 11 days we have in October, but it's also the year-round program. So for the last 26 years, we presented documentaries in senior centers. It's interesting, the gentleman who is sitting behind me just reminded me that he knows me because of the Chan House and the screens in the city. The senior centers is just one of them, but we presented in Avenidas as well. And then we do work with the veterans. Also, we present the documentaries in the veteran homes, and we present the documentaries in the schools, and we work with the teachers. One of the beneficial program, obviously, is education. We are not just a film festival as what we had in the previous years, and there are several films we try to be, but they I know it's like a 3 minutes that I have to leave. So anyway, I would have to ask the financial committee to continue supporting us with the $25,000, because that's the essential for existence of our film festival. So this is the message, and it's not only a message from me as founding director, but it's also a message from our community. And I'm so looking forward to see some members of the council also be part of our event on this Thursday. It was not planned, but it just happened to be like that. So thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Ken Horowitz, to be followed by our final speaker, Karen Kwan. Welcome.
Yeah, thank you. First of all, I want to thank the Finance Committee for really looking into the whole Cubberley budget. I've mentioned this on numerous occasions to City Council. I've always felt that the city was getting shortchanged by school district in regards to the rentals regarding Cubberley. I'm glad that the Finance Committee is really looking deeply into this. And you have a decision to make next year regarding the lease, whether you want to continue that, which is why I bring up, there's 2 items in the capital improvement plan. And I mentioned this the last time the Finance Committee met. One is the HVAC replacement that's in the gyms, which is $900,000. And whether you're going to go ahead and do that HVAC replacement with the possibility you may not renew the lease with the school district. And then in 2026, you're planning to do a turf replacement, which is $2.6 million. So I wanted to make you aware of, I'm as a community member, I think the Palo Alto Unified School District needs to step up to the plate. And I think they do have monies now because they have bonds that they collect from citizens, whereas the city isn't able to collect bonds through taxes. And so I think they need to come up with their fair share. And I was kind of disappointed, and I don't know if this had anything to do with the school liaison meeting the month before, but this month's meeting was canceled. And I kind of felt, and if you read some of the articles, letters to the editor from Ken Dauber and his wife, Michelle, kind of saying that the school district really has been forthright. I don't think they've been forthright with the city. And I've gone to school board meetings there, and there was one gentleman, Mr. Golton, who was director of their facilities, kept saying to the school district, don't sell any land. Over and over again for years and years, their position was, we're not going to sell land. Land is valuable. We don't want to sell it. So I'm really glad that we have at least an opportunity now, but I want to share those thoughts with you. So have a great meeting, and thank you for your time.
And our last speaker is Karen Kwan, remotely. Welcome.
Thank you so much. This is Karen Kwan. I'm Director of Development with the Palo Alto Arts Center Foundation. Thank you again for keeping the arts positions in the tier 2 for consideration. I do want to mention again the importance of considering and supporting both positions. The program assistant 1 at 0.75 FTE will support opening hours on Sundays.
Karen, can you get closer to your mic?
Yes. I wanted to highlight the program assistant 1 at 0.75 FTE will support opening hours on Sundays for the pandemic cut and allow for revenue generating film workshops to happen would benefit the city. I also want to clarify again because I heard Councilmember Lowing mentioned the use volunteers in installing artwork at the Art Center. That is incorrect. Our fine art installation crews are paid professionals currently supported by the Palo Alto Arts Center Foundation. These artworks are insured by the City of Palo Alto's fine art insurance, and previous installation crew members were temporary hourly city employees. The amount currently on consideration would cover both program assistant 1 at 75 FTE with the remaining 30,000 installation crew. We would so appreciate your continued championship. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. So returning to the committee, I do have other questions, but let me see if colleagues would like to weigh in on anything. Great.
Thanks. Couple questions on the staff's recommended tier 2 reductions on slide 5. Start with the youth mental health 50% reduction. So is the thinking there that half of it would be spent now, the other half would come up in our mid-year adjustment? And what does that then look like? Because I know we don't have a plan yet for this money. So I'm torn because this is one of our priorities. We don't want to touch it. We've talked so much this year about the critical importance, especially now for youth mental health. We don't have a plan, so I'm curious what that looks like.
Sure. And I'll ask Director O'Kane to join us in this conversation. The staff's proposal on this is basically we acknowledge and support council's priority of youth programming for mental health purposes. But as you noted, we don't necessarily have a plan for the full 200,000. So what this would do would enable us to start working on that and then come with a more concrete idea of allocation of resources as part of mid-year. So this would allow us to start that work now, acknowledging that we likely would potentially ask for more money later on. So Kristen, do you have any additional feedback on this?
Thank you. No, I do not. I think you stated that perfectly, Kylie.
Cool. Thanks.
Okay. So Director Kane, in your opinion, this is a good starting point to allow us to be able to continue to do this work. Okay,
Exactly.
good.
Yes.
That's good enough for me. Thank you. On airplane noise reduction, 25% reduction. So what is that? What do we then see as far as advocacy and the work the city's doing? I mean, one of my concerns is I think we've actually been starting to see some momentum now with SFO and some other areas, and I don't want us to lose that momentum. So 25% reduction here, what does that do?
Thank you, Vice Mayor. Overall, I'd say that the intent of the 100,000 budget proposal initially in tier 2 was to bring on consulting resources for potential technical work. It was really a placeholder number. We don't have a clear definition of the scope of work for that at this point. So we thought it was important enough to still want to keep the majority of that funding, but that it could be a contributor to finding the savings we're looking for.
Okay. I appreciate what the chair said as far as the eucalyptus tree removal. I was concerned about that, but I think the Stanford approach seems to make a lot of sense. I guess my only concern is if this is pushed off to mid-year budget review, that means those trees are not removed for the upcoming fire season, but hopes if we are going to El Nino year and given the rainfall this year, maybe we were to delay a fire season, this might be the one to do it. So I think I'm comfortable with that. Assuming that then gets referred to our Stanford ad hoc to be able to continue. And then I think one area I'm just can staff, I guess Director O'Kane, this is back to you. The first recommended item here, the unhoused resident services. Was that another one kind of like the youth mental health where we don't really have a plan for it?
Thank you for that question. That might be for Assistant to the City Manager, Melissa McDonough or Chantel Cotton Gaines.
That's correct. It would be Melissa or Chantal. But I do believe that you are correct. It's a placeholder for us and we think we can continue working in the absence of that.
That's correct.
Oh, okay. So the additional 100,000 would not help on that front. I was just kind of looking at that compared to some of the others that are still on the list that I could see swapping, but if it's not gonna.
I think what we're hearing from staff, and Chantal, please add in on this, is I think as City Manager Shikata said last Monday, we are at a tipping point in terms of capacity to start on all of these things on July 1. And so what staff really did was looked at kind of in a more realistic way, what are we going to do over the next 6 months and what dollars are going to be critical to progress during that period of time versus either on the bubble or are known, frankly, that we won't need them till later. And so this fell into that category. We won't stop doing work around supporting unhoused residents. And we don't think that on July 1, we're going to be able to have a contract and a plan to allocate those funds. And so delaying that to a conversation at mid-year, acknowledging staff's capacity was part of that recommendation.
Yeah, just some positive feedback. I really appreciate that staff heard that I think request from finance and further discussion at council as far as let us know what's possible and what's not on July 1. So I appreciate this list and have some of those clarifications and that understanding, because there's no point for us to force this on staff if staff then can't turn around and produce results for mid-year. So I think with all that, I'm comfortable with this list.
Julie?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I am in agreement in many respects with the Vice Mayor. I do want to broaden this out for a second and just say it is, I find it curious. First timer in this process, I acknowledge there's much I don't know, but there are some items that were given to us on tier 2 that are vital to the well functioning of the city that really hit a massive major goal of council. And then there are items on tier 2 that are like estimated placeholder for seed funding to support an incremental program, which is about as wishy-washy as one could be in trying to identify something. And I don't mean wishy-washy in a negative sense, it's just really vague. And that's because there's no there yet. And so we're grappling with how to allocate these funds. And for me, it comes back to if something is critical as a departmental and council priority, next year, I don't want to see it on the tier 2. I want to see it in the main budget proposal and really hope that tier 2 is going to be the extra things that people are hoping for, but we realize there's not enough money for. And it feels to me that we're dealing with apples and oranges, is I guess the succinct way to articulate what concerns me right now. So I am in agreement that unhoused resident services, given that it is a placeholder for seed funding to support an incremental program, in the context of Life Moves, a major partner of ours, really struggling with connecting unhoused residents to housing beyond transitional to permanent housing and to services. I'm not interested in throwing dollars at it this year until we really have a sense of what these dollars are going to do. And I'm just not seeing that yet. Don't let anyone read this as a lack of support for the unhoused in this community. What we're saying is we want to spend dollars in a way that's going to be effective. Similarly, youth mental health, which is a priority for all of us, I know this is also a placeholder for something that could in theory exist, yet our teen center is not open for teens. We built that thing. It's in Mitchell Park. It's gorgeous. No one can go there because we haven't hired the staff. We haven't landed. We haven't interviewed and hired people who want the job. And I would rather us double down on opening that teen center, which somebody years ago decided was a way to help address and promote support youth mental health, than put dollars toward a much more amorphous placeholder thing. So for that reason, I'm actually advocating we cut the full 200,000 here. I'm a huge proponent of supporting our youth I just don't see that this 200,000 or 100,000 really has a plan at all attached to it. So I'd rather not spend it in the coming year and spend it when we have a plan. On eucalyptus trees, I do feel it's incredibly risky to head into fire season when our fire chief has said we need to remove the eucalyptus trees. Again, it goes for me back to why is it a tier 2? You know, why is it not in the main budget? It feels risky to me to cut that. I'm encouraged by your suggestion, Chair, that maybe there's a possibility of aligning with Stanford on that. And if you feel that's likely, then
I just
why are you
want to-
smiling?
Well, because I think our city staff will verify that this got on the agenda in part because I raised a big issue about it starting in 2020. So the irony of the being willing to compromise on that is not lost.
Okay. Well, if we've got a potential partner in Stanford on this, then I'm happy removing it from the tier 2, but otherwise this did really feel like a red flag to me. And something it'd be hard to face the community of having not cut down the trees if we end up with a hot fire season, you know, that eucalyptus are like bombs that go off in fire. Huberly, I appreciate the public comment from Ms. Horowitz, Dr. Horowitz, about the 900,000 for HVAC replacement and 2.6 for turf replacement. And without getting into the politics of this at all, given that we are meeting as a council to figure out what we'd like to ask of the school district by way of a future relationship on property, I am wondering what $900,000 this year or fiscal 24, I mean, does for us, why we're considering giving 370,000 of it back here on the tier 2. Why would we not give the whole 900 of it back? If it's for custodial services that are essential, why is it in the tier 2 at all? If something is going to shut down our Cubberley maintenance because we don't allocate some of these hundreds of thousands of dollars toward it, why is it tier 2? So I'm gleaning because it's tier 2 that it's not super important.
This is really what we, I suppose in the business refer to as a color money issue as to whether the funding comes through what had previously been identified as the Cubberley Infrastructure Fund versus the general fund. So that's really the issue at hand, not whether we're going to continue custodial services at Cubberley.
I'll just add, this was not on staff's tier 2 list. This is something that the committee had brought up in terms of the color of money, as the manager Shikata identified. And so this is on that list, and we tried to refine that number in alignment with the intentions that the committee gave us.
If I can add, so just a refresher of this conversation we had previously, this fund was originally an agreement with the PAUSD that we would no longer pay them a covenant not to develop, and those funds would go into what was an underfunded capital and major maintenance program there. And in recent years, that had drifted into kind of operational, custodial, and other maintenance. And so this action would put more funds into the capital for Cubberley. I am going to be interested in just getting a better understanding of. I was a little confused on what has shifted in this and just how staff now is defining the allocations that should come from general fund versus the Cubberley Infrastructure Fund when we get back to it.
And the last thing I've got is this, just to make sure I've got it right. The $400,000 for full EV fleet replacement, 50%. We had decided to only go with 50% replacement. That was what was proposed. So this is pulling it back to 0, right?
No, raising it to 100%.
It was 800,000, wasn't it?
I'm sorry, Paul, can you correct us on this one? What does it do?
Yeah, say Brad's on the line if you want to take this, Brad.
I'm happy to speak to that. So yes, it's correct. Originally, the tier 2 proposal was 800,000 from the general fund. Finance committee in your discussions reduced that by half. And now the current staff recommendation here is to bring that down to 0 for additional funding for these heavy EVs to be reconsidered at mid-year. I would add, though, we have a restructured project for fleet replacements for next fiscal year. and already have a very large number of EV additions to the fleet. What this leaves undone is a step of starting to replace heavier machinery, medium, heavy duty trucks with EVs where those are available.
Okay, thank you. That's all for me.
Okay. Just one looping back on the eucalyptus. My assumption was that if it was in this budget, they would not be removed during this fire season. That we've got between July 1st and October, and that's pretty unlikely. And that if we are able to add mid-year, we prospectively, especially if we're going into the mid-year budget cycle, anticipating it, we would have time to begin to look at options on that. I am hopeful that we might be able to have a lower expense. I know the Fire Safe Council that does widespread fire prevention in Santa Clara County, and now it's a nonprofit, and now they do it. I was speaking with them recently at a Stanford event. They now have a big contract in, I think, Alameda County, similarly removing eucalyptus. And interestingly, they now do that in combination with an on-site pyrolysis unit. So they produce biochar on-site, chip the wood and do it right there, and do essentially a carbon capture technology there. But because they're a nonprofit, they're pretty economical, and perhaps we'll see that they're able to beat our budget if they're the best provider of that service. So we have gone back and touched on this mid-year concept, which we discussed at the council meeting, and I think it's a real good approach to, for the reasons the city manager stated, is we really couldn't buy all these apples at once. And second, because we'll have a better visibility on our resources. But I wanted to make sure I was clear on, are we saying that all the things that we're deferring, are we saying, excuse me, let me state it differently. All the items that the Finance Committee had recommended be included in Tier 2, but which we are now pulling back on in this report as a result of our council discussion, those would be the items that we tentatively be reconsidering at mid-year. It's the set. Is that correct?
Yeah, that would be a set of things we would be reconsidering,
And maybe some other things that would emerge. Okay, I just wanted to, so this, got it. Okay. And then I wanted to go back and get clarification on the Life Moves project, because we have 2.5 million in there. And some of this, I apologize, because we may have discussed in prior budget meeting, and I just got to get fresh on it again. We're listing all that as under the capital. Was that 2 million in cash and 500,000 in lieu waivers of expenses? Was that what that was?
Deputy City Manager Cotton Gaines, or Assistant to the City Manager Melissa, are you on the line? I'm looking, sorry.
This is Linda. Hi, I'm on the line. Thank you, council members, the commission members. Thank you, Kylie. The 2.5 covers any items that have been removed from the project that council should like to entertain putting back in, such as PV panels. And about $500,000 of that's what we're estimating the fees would cost. So it's not in lieu. Those are actually hours that, say, building plans examiners are doing work, and it's cost recovery thing. I hope that answers your question, sir.
Okay, well, now I'm confused because I thought that 2 million was our share of the late shortfall that they have. And that was a shortfall after some of those kind of optional expenditures like the solar panels had been removed from the budget.
So here, let me help. In your CIP budget is that 2 million. So there's a project in your CIP. I'm not quite sure the project number. Is that 2 million that you just identified, Chair? The 2.5, as Melissa just identified, is for those product extras that were removed.
Beyond the 2 million
Beyond
in
the
the
2 million.
CIP.
Right, so the 2 million in the CIP, then on this list, there's another 2.5. I apologize that all numbers are in the 2 range. And that is for the additional things like solar EV. And the 500,000, to your point, is an estimate of what the kind of fees are, the permit fees would be. And as that fund is, self-sufficient, it's full cost recovery, we move money to make sure that the development center stayed whole, and use and pay those fees essentially. Again, it gets back to that kind of color of money and making sure that the dev center is fully funded. So they are costs.
I had been confused on that 2.5. I was assuming it was the same 2 million that is our share of the 6 million shortfall that they had. So that begs an interesting question then, and I'm not sure my colleagues had understood, but that right now is in the tier 2 recommendations, correct?
It is, but remember that's funded by operating funds that were set aside for Home Key. So we are recognizing 2 years of operating funds for Home Key set aside, transitioning those to capital, acknowledging in 5 years we'll need to continue to fund 7 years of operating costs. So there is a source and a use, I guess, is what I'm trying to say, to fund at 2.5. To fund 2. Sorry, yes, correct. Yes, thank you, Councilmember with Haynes. 500,000 would cover.
Okay, but out of that 2 million, I want to make sure I'm understanding what it's going for and how whether how critical they are to the project. I know that this is even Life Moves and Sobrato Philanthropies are dependent on the city's commitment to fill our share of that $6 million gap, the 2 million. But these other elements to that are the solar and EVs, can you break down what's in that second 2 million and how critical these things are construed to be to Life Moves and project itself?
Melissa?
Yes, that's detailed a little bit more in the report we'll be bringing to you on June 12th, but just broadly speaking, about $1 million of that would be 871,000, I believe, would be for the solar panels. And then portions of that would be, say, EV chargers. We had a feeling that council would want to add back in things of that nature. There's also something that is not included in the project that our fire folks feel very strongly about. That's sprinklers on a storage structure and sprinklers on garbage enclosure. That's another couple $100,000. So there's like a list of these things that we thought council might be interested in adding back in. Some of them are of that nature. Some of them are more aesthetic, like a different type of fencing on the exterior. If we wanted decorative fencing, that would be part of that 2 million. I hope that helps.
Okay, that does help. It, in my own mind, kind of puts these in 2 buckets. Some things that are important for fire safety. The fencing, I think, is actually important for the whole sense of this being a welcoming place. The EV and solar is something I very much would want to see in this project ultimately, but it raised a question for me on whether that should be in a mid-year consideration or next year's, and I don't know whether those can be done as a retrofit. For instance, on the EV, we'd want to make sure that we would have the there's 3 tiers. There's installed, there's fully ready, and then there's just the power pole, right? I forget how we characterize that. And so, and I appreciate that we're going to have a fuller discussion of this at the upcoming council meeting, but it ties into the budget here tonight. So without going into too much depth on that, the staff have any insights on how important the solar and the EV is to Life Moves versus the other parts that Melissa just described? And important to Life Moves generally, and important to Life Moves at the outset. I should have clarified.
I can speak to the timing of this, council member. In terms of both the EV and the solar, if this is something council thinks it would want to have down the line, it's important to know that at groundbreaking, basically, because they design things in a certain way to accommodate for that. Whether or not the dollars would have to be allocated immediately is not as critical, but whether or not we're incorporating them. In terms of the actual solar panels, that would be a critical element to include because of new statewide requirements that happened this year.
It would be required to have the on-site solar, you're saying?
I believe that, yes.
And related to that is the grant funding opportunities. Here we have a low income, in fact, transitional housing project that is more eligible for a number of the state grants. And I believe now the new federal subsidies from, I think it was in the Inflation Reduction Act. And we're putting these expenses, it looks like, all as a city expense. Is that because we haven't yet identified prospective or solidified? Even if we've identified prospective grant funding, federal and state funding, we don't have them in hand. Can there be any clarification on, is this something that we think likely we're going to be able to, if we make it ready for these elements, there's a good chance that they won't need to come out of city funding. In fact, is that the case?
Melissa, Chantal, we need you to answer those questions.
Yes, so I believe the solar panels is something that we may be able to find alternate funding sources for. It's something we've been working on. I can't speak to it more closely than that in this particular setting. We have looked around a bit. We have not seen something specific to EV chargers for this site that we would be able to utilize to cover that expense.
And if we did the EV readiness, I mean, I would think that the EV chargers there are less critical than the solar, for instance, if I were to rank them. And so if we simply have the power pulled as part of the project and then wait for a future date on whether it's city funding or grant funding on installing EV chargers.
I think those are the viable options, as you just described, Chair. Let me just try to characterize what I think I heard from staff here. It's a work in progress, and as such, it's difficult to give you a very specific assurance as to one path versus the other. So it really is a question of timing on decision making and whether it's best to provide the capacity in the budget process in order to give us the flexibility to continue to look at options versus foreclose those options by not having that flexibility.
Yeah, so I support building in the flexibility, even if we don't have the full allocation to implement them in this, but whether it goes over to mid-year or it goes to other sources. I also want to make sure that we're understanding our partners' perspective on this, and that my understanding was that they were very focused on us coming forward with $2 million that's in the capital budget and the $500,000 that's in the fee waiver, and those were their highest priorities. I just want to make sure we're understanding their perspective correctly, and that this decision wouldn't do anything to hinder the project and our partners. Okay, so on that note, I'm kind of procedurally, we're going to have a little bit of a dilemma because we'll have this upcoming at a council meeting. I'm guessing we can have a little more staff clarity on these issues that we're fleshing out by that council meeting. So that might be some additional funding that comes back into discretion that we were looking for, depending on those clarifications. Does that seem correct?
Say that last part one more time for me. I had you until the.
So if right now we don't know whether we need to have know we need the 500,000, or we want to make the commitment of 500,000 on the fee waivers. And then we got 2 million for a combination of fire safety, EV and solar and fencing. We said, okay, I think we had the heads nodding here that the fire safety highest priority, the fencing perhaps almost as high. And on the solar and the EV, we're going to want to have the council discussion and a little more clarification on whether that could be deferred, whether our partners would be okay with deferring that, and just what would be the financial ramifications of deferring the solar and the EVs, or I don't know. We'll get additional clarification. So if we got, let's call it a 500,000 or $1 million that we might be able to defer out of that 2.5, we can't really count on that tonight because the council hasn't had this discussion, and we probably need to get a little more clarification between now and the council meeting. And so that is potentially some funds to add back that we were struggling with.
Sure. I think I follow you now. So thank you for walking me through that. Just one point of clarification on how this full 2.5 was allocated. If you recall, there's 2 million of the 2.5 that was set aside for the operating expenses of Life Moves. So when you say that, if the council chose not to move forward, say the EVs or the solar, you would then also face the second question of, if we don't prioritize this for capital, do you want it to be free and clear funds, or would you reserve it back for those operating expenses? Just want to make sure that's clear.
That's right. Those so be things that the council, in the Life Moves context and in the budget, will need to consider.
Right. And then just one last piece, the team had let me know that 500,000, yes, is funded by the general fund, but it is offset by the Measure K funds. This was one of the eligible activities. So again, if we didn't do that 500,000, or you were adjusting this in some way, shape, or form,
but on the 500,000 and plus the fire safety plus the fencing, we're over that 750K that we had allocated for the Measure K. So I don't think that's really an issue there. I don't foresee that being one.
Great.
Okay. I did want to get a clarification. Julie was referring to the Teen Center staffing, but it isn't closed. It's my understanding. It's a question of what hours we would be able to expand from the current level. Is that correct? I just want to make sure I understand the alternatives there. Where Teen Center isn't closed all the time.
Well, I think that's where we need to have Director Kane describe the current status.
Sure. Thank you, Christine O'Kane, Community Services. So the Teen Center has been closed due to the fact that we are not able to hire staff to work at the Teen Center. Traditionally, we've used high school students, and it's been difficult for them to get to the Teen Center in time. We have a continuous opening on our HR page for recruitment, and we just haven't received enough qualified candidates. So as a result, it hasn't been able to remain open for this school year.
Okay, well, thanks for that clarification. I was under a different understanding. So the alternatives we have in that are what? It's not in the current set of tier 2 options, correct?
The Teen Center?
The staffing. So we've got, I guess, first, if we have a certain level of staffing that we haven't been able to fill, that's in the budget, correct?
Right. The positions are budgeted. It's just an issue of being able to fill them.
Okay.
But one thing that we're doing, council member, moving forward is looking at potentially using volunteers to staff that next year, and trying to find other creative ways to keep it open. It is used by our teen leadership groups. They do host special events in the Teen Center, usually on weekends or evenings. So there is it's open in that sense, and that there's special events that are hosted, but it is open, hasn't been open typically after school.
And is under that volunteer theme, has Project Safety Net been presented with kind of this reality that we have this teen center that we aren't able to operate, and whether they might be able to help provide resources in any way.
No, we haven't communicated that necessarily with Project Safety Net. I'm not sure if, they would have resources to focus on this, but I could certainly reach out to them.
Yeah, within partners, we know we have partners who are focused on downstream issues and ones that are more on the upstream where this might apply. And I'd be hopeful that we could do that. And yeah, I hadn't been aware of this, and I suspect there are some resources that might be able to come and play here.
Could I offer
Julie?
just a further thought? Thank you, Director O'Kane, for clarifying. The problem here is that high school now ends, I guess, significantly later than middle school, which is why we're having trouble recruiting high schoolers. We want high schoolers to be truant at school, getting to their job, supporting the middle schoolers, teen center. So somebody's got to crack this nut, Director O'Kane. Someone's got to figure out how to offer it for middle schoolers, staffed appropriately with humans of whatever age. We talked in a prior meeting about seniors being volunteers to work with youth. It's just such a shame. I'm an alternate to the Alto Youth Council, and they meet over there in Mitchell. When I got a glimpse of how beautiful Teen Center is, and just knowing that it sits dark most of the time, it's just an example of how we got to have the throughput on our goals and visions, because a whole lot of people design that thing. So we're all crossing our fingers that you're going to figure out the staffing issue creatively. Thank you.
Greer?
Just real quick, Director O'Kane, have you reached out to the school district to see what possible partnerships there are there? I know within the schools there are a lot of there's a lot of certificated staff members like instructional assistants who work full time but typically are paid less. I would imagine are probably paid at a similar scale as what we would be paying for this position. People like that are often within the schools, often looking for other after school hours, and unfortunately within the school district, so many after school positions require a credential they can't do. I'm wondering if there might be interest in actual partnership there to be able to do that.
Yeah, thank you, Council Member, for that suggestion. I don't know if our recreation staff have reached out to them, but I will certainly make sure that they do that. Thank you.
And then one other community services question on the Art Center. Karen Kwan spoke tonight, and if I capture what she was saying correctly, the Art Center Foundation would like us to approve that combination of staffing. We had a discussion at our last Finance Committee meeting on whether to go with the front office staffing. That's not the right way to describe it, but or a combination of that and the exhibit placement staffing. Can you clarify on that, Kristen?
Sure. So, like most things, it's difficult to choose one that's a priority. So, the Art Center staff has prepared a proposal that reduces the customer service staff at the Art Center, which is a program assistant 1, and also reduces the exhibition installation staff to get to the number that the Finance Committee is comfortable with. And I'm not sure Assistant City Manager knows where that number might be.
Sure. It's on staff report, page 11, or packet page 174 from the May 22nd packet.
Okay.
And it's I believe the cost is $124,000 annually.
Oh, good. Okay. So that's what's in the current proposal.
It's not. So the current proposal has what the Finance Committee discussed, which is the full-time position. Since you had a discussion at length over splitting it one or the other. If you wanted to switch that, I think just including that as part of it, staff can do the administrative work.
Okay, good. That helps. And then we also had the speaker on the UNAF funding. Last year, the council had supported this $25,000 funding, and I thought at the time the council discussion was an interest in that being an ongoing funding, but I hadn't appreciated it's a small item in the big budget, but if it's not in there on an ongoing basis, is that the case?
I'm gonna have to look at that. I'm not
Okay.
sure unless Director Kane, are you aware?
Yeah, thank you. I believe that was a one-time funding.
We did it last year as a one-time funding, kind of out of the regular budget cycle. And I thought we gave support at that time for doing this on an ongoing basis. So if that's wasn't done in this budget, then we should, as a committee, discuss whether that's in fact what we want to do.
It's in the budget.
Okay. Maybe Julie may have found it in the budget,
Well,
which
I'm
would be
on
good
page
news.
215. Well, on page 215, Community Services, United Nations Association Film Festival. It's got a parenthesis around it, 1 year budget. That was somebody with more familiarity with the document. Help me out. Page 215.
215.
It's in the prior year budget, one-time prior year budget adjustment, parenthesis 20,000.
Yeah, so
Does that
that
mean-
essentially means that it was a one-time add last year and it was pulled out of the budget for 2024.
Okay, so we need to give guidance if
We want to put it back.
want to recommend that it be on. And it was 20, not 25, I see.
Yep.
Although was there also a council contingency expenditure at that time? Is that why it was 20 rather than 25?
Possibly.
And I have this vague memory of that.
Well, among vague memories, I will also share that I somewhat distinctly recall a conversation last year. And at that point in time, I think we had hoped that we would have completed a broader review of grant allocations that would provide a overall, we'll call it programmatic strategy. And obviously, we're not there. Which may be why it's necessary for us to do more Band-Aids, so to speak.
Okay. Okay. And let's see, lastly, I think I had started to ask about that hourly maintenance allocations for a better breakdown of what we have in the latest proposal on what's covered under the capital versus what would be covered under staff's proposal out of the general fund. Custodial and routine maintenance is what I described.
Correct. So the current proposal, as you're seeing here, would essentially move the custodial type staffing back to the general fund and leave the systems maintenance work, the larger just working on like HVAC systems, things like that to maintain the facility would be kept in the Coverly Fund itself.
Okay, so the stuff I'm looking at, page 13 of the staff report, the ones that look to me like they'd be under routine general fund expenses, things like fire and sprinkler inspections, dusting repair, parking lot sweeping, and then other custodial work. Are those the things all that you're saying be in general fund? And how many dollars associated with those?
So I believe kind of the fire systems that would stay in the maintenance fund, the Coverly Fund, but the parking lot sweeping, the dusting, things like that, that would be what would be moved to the general fund. And that amount would be the $370,000 that would be moved. That would be moved to the general fund.
Okay, this may be getting a little granular, but I'm surprised that things like just fire alarm and sprinkler inspections are viewed as capital. That's maintenance. It's just keeping things in good repair. It's not installing new equipment. It's not a major replacement. It's just ongoing things you have to do for operations. Okay, so it's you're saying only that 300 and something thousand. So I would recommend that we refine that and make sure that we're putting the right things that are things that are truly regular operational requirements, like sprinkler and fire system inspections and repair. That those go into the operating fund.
So I think, Chair, some help on that. Staff did take the best estimate of that, like you said on staff report, page 13. or back at page 176, because past council motion does specifically say ongoing maintenance associated with the facility. So we really did try to actually do what you identified, which is take things that are, sweeping, cleaning, kind of generalized day-to-day maintenance activities and separate that from what's keeping the facility running, which would be repairs, window replacements, painting of the interiors, electrical, plumbing, sprinkler systems and the like. So if there's a different interpretation of that, I think that would be important for us to know so that we can adjust, because we did try to split it out as you
Okay,
identified
yeah.
based on the motion that said ongoing
Well,
maintenance for
and
the
as I had
facility.
suggested last time, that reviewing the council meeting or the minutes, I think provides clarification. I recollect, you're talking about when this was originally made in 2013 or so by council.
Right, 2014, the motion and the intentions behind it. We did our best guess at interpreting that and
Yeah,
the
so I think that
activities.
when you say you did best guess, it's taking that literal reading of wording in the motion and trying to construe what that meant. I'm saying that the record gives better clarity. And the context was that we had been doing all of these things all along before that motion. And we had a significant discussion over multiple meetings over a couple of years as a council that what we weren't doing was major facility repair work, roof replacement, HVAC replacement, a lot of those kinds of things. And what we said at the time, and like I said, I'm going back in memory, but it was my motion. It was all in that context of doing the things that we weren't able to do up until then. And that these dollars would be dedicated for that. And I think that the record will clarify that if we look at the context of that.
So then if that's the intention of this committee, then you would need to up this to 900,000.
Well, I don't know that it need to go to the full 900. That's why I was asking Paul for some of that clarification.
Which is there. So Chair, on page 13 at the bottom of the second to last paragraph, it identifies the work and the wide range of work the facility service staff do. Standard repair for plumbing, electrical, heating, ventilation system and equipment, maintaining these systems, coordinating maintenance tasks, etc. So
that's included in the 300,000 or in the 900?
So remember, the 300,000 is a subset of the 900,000. So those tasks in the second paragraph are the tasks that are left to be funded out of the Coverly Infrastructure Fund. The 370,000 would be tasks in the final paragraph of that page that talked about the perform a variety of daily tasks like custodial work, such as sweeping, vacuuming, polishing floors, furniture, woodworking, cleaning restrooms, washing windows, replenishing supplies. So that's how staff tried to delineate. And ultimately, it is a policy call on if the above list, so the paragraph right after the table, if those items are desired to be in the general fund or not.
Okay, so you're saying that the following table 3, there are 2 paragraphs. The first paragraph, you're saying the things that would still, under staff proposal, still be included under the capital fund.
Under the Coverly Infrastructure Fund.
Okay.
Correct.
When I look at that, there are some of those things that I would think would be in the capital and others that would not. So I'm not sure it goes to the full 900,000. We're not going to be able to sort that out this evening, but I would say, for instance, parking lot sweeping. That's just normal operations. Fire and sprinkler inspections. But when you talk about drywall installation, window replacement, even painting of interior, those are things that weren't getting done. And I would be comfortable with those staying in the capital fund. So maybe we can give guidance and staff can take another cut refining this on that basis by the time it comes back to the council.
Let me invite either Directors O'Kane or Eggleston to comment on this. I would share part of the issue is how difficult it might be to account for the the use of the funds, where the way that staff has proposed breaking it out is basically through the people, that the people will define whether it's capital or ongoing maintenance, such as in janitorial. If we are now trying to segregate portions of what the facilities technicians, as described in that paragraph, are doing, that does add a level of complexity to just even being able to keep track of how they're spending their time. And, you know, as an example, these staff are not typically segregating their time as an engineer would to different capital projects. In this case, it would add that.
And this would be public works staff rather than outsourced in that case, you're saying?
Yes, public works are community services.
So I get that distinction.
Yes.
Before the staff kind of wades in there. Even within that distinction, some of these look like easy calls. Parking lot sweeping, you know, and inspections, things that aren't physical replacements. And if we get into a difficult gray area, I'm okay with some flexibility there. I'm not trying to be rigid here, but I'm trying to do the best we can of being faithful to the commitment that we made actually to the community and the PAUSD at the time, as well as needs that are there.
Okay, Director Eggleston, would you like to comment?
Yeah, thank you, City Manager Chicago. Just to add on, looking at the list of things, I think some of it's probably fairly simple to delineate in terms of where we got contracts. But I do agree, our facility technicians, staff that are out at Coverly and other facilities, really performing a variety of functions, some of which are you know, routine preventive maintenance, type maintenance of building systems as listed in the staff report, some of which are coming for responding to calls for service with problems in a facility or doing replacements and repairs. We generally don't have the level of tracking for those individuals to be able to say, you know, okay, these many FTEs are spending this exact percentage of their time on one of those types of activities versus another. I do, however, think that part of the contracts is a pretty easy lift.
To pick up on that, Chair, I think to agree with what you're suggesting, if it's a contract for parking lot sweeping as an example, that could clearly be treated as an ongoing operational expense.
Okay, and I'm good with not getting this precisely right, but I will add something else that occurred to me, which is up until 2018, when we then changed what had been the practice for the preceding 4 years or so, we did have some other way that we're doing it, and we shifted. And if we reverted to how we did it before, I think we'd be pretty much on target. I don't know what that was.
Yeah, I will say that the way that this was split was essentially split in the two different items were brought to council to move the costs from the general fund to Coverly. So the first one was essentially the public works related work, which includes that 500,000-ish. And then the second was that 370,000 for mainly custodial work. So this does kind of go back to what we did at those times and try to split it that way again, based on the work that was shifted, those two different tranches.
I mean, I think basically we should be returning to what we did the first 4 years after adopting the mission, which was based upon what was then a clearer understanding of the intent. And then over time, it drifted away. And we should be returning to what was the original intent. Where that is, I'll leave it to you. Okay. And well, let me check in, colleague, you first on that note, whether you concur and then anything else yet.
Sometimes I feel like the little sister in the crowd. I concur on Coverly. And I do have something else I want to say about airplane noise, but I'll see what the mayor wants to add.
I understand what staff's trying to accomplish there, but I think this, you know, this helps. I think will help clarify when it comes back and just make sure it's a little cleaner. So I'm fine with that.
And airplane noise?
Yeah, thanks. It's another item that, of course, we're all concerned about airplane noise, and a number of our residents are greatly impacted. But the tier 2 item for 100,000 reflects an estimated placeholder for consultant services to engage in the SFO GBAS process and other potential noticing opportunities by attending meetings, reviewing and commenting on technical information, all for $100,000. And so the proposal is that we recoup $25,000 from that. And I find myself asking, well, what does 75% of a consultant get us? And is that sort of an arbitrary thing? Or do we have some sense that, I mean, is it sort of, we get 75% of a consultant, or we're stretching a consultant out over 2 years with that, or a year and a half? And I'm basically wondering if there's more to be recouped there. If we can't get a consultant we need, airplane noise, because we can't spend $100,000, maybe we need to spend $0 this year and fully fund it at the mid-year. It would allow us to recoup, even if we went down to 50% of the consultant, we'd get 25,000 back that we could spend on the United Nations Film Festival, which is why I began to look at this a little bit more closely.
Just was that a question or comment?
It was a thinly veiled question. Yes. So tell us what that reduction in consultancy actually gets us, please.
Thank you, council member. As I said before, and I think you read from the budget proposal, it really is a placeholder, and we don't have clear scope yet for what that consultant would do.
I would add, again, it's not either 75% or 100% of a consultant. This is time. It's a question of how much time we will have contractual capacity to have as a resource.
So what I'm hearing is that it's a placeholder, something that isn't really scoped, and it just feels that perhaps this is not the year to be allocating any funds to that item. I'd like to see us do something about this, but this doesn't feel to be doing it.
Well, in this case, 3/4 of a loaf, for lack of a better analogy, is better than no loaf at all. So it does give us some capacity to continue technical analysis and support in pursuit of our interests.
Keep momentum. I think Greer wants to jump on it.
Yeah, I mean, having served now as the liaison to the SFO roundtable, being very connected with between staff, SFO, and many of our community members, we've just been really sorely lacking that technical expertise. And we, as a community, have been so benefited by volunteer time that a lot of residents with some incredible technical expertise in this area has been able to do, but we continue to run up against walls not having that consultant. And as I mentioned earlier, we're finally starting to make some headwinds on, so we're finally able to start making some progress here. And I was on a call today with the director of the San Francisco airport, and we're starting to see some movement. I'd hate to see us derail this.
Got it. I get it. Thanks.
Okay, so I think we're at a point where we start trying to put the pieces together. So I don't know how much staff has been capturing the discussion, but Paul's been doing that. We had the I've got a few notes in case once after he gives or whoever gets a shot at it. We have the table, the kind of starting point on slide 5. Maybe we should even pull that up so we can all be staring at that. And then is it a series of adjustments off of that?
Paul, I think it might be the slide 4 and 5, because 4 was the full list. 5 is the revised list to acknowledge that $1 million. So you actually, I think, would like the combined.
Well, I think we want to focus on how we're dealing that $1 million.
Agreed.
Unless there's a reason that we need to look at the full list.
Your final motion, you'll, for this point right now, it is not necessary.
Okay.
Also, I just wanted to clarify. So the Coverly one got me thinking a little bit. So your proposal, as part of the tier 2 items, to shift 900,000 over to the general fund. What this would do, it would leave 370,000 in the Coverly fund and continue to shift about 500,000 to the general fund. And that number, sorry, I misstated earlier. That number would be the amount that would be staying in the Coverly fund, whereas the majority would be moving back to the general fund.
I see. Let's see. Where is that?
The 370 at the bottom. So,
I see.
So that would be the amount that would be staying in the Coverly fund as the public works related.
So that's on the bow, depending on how you go back and look at how we allocated versus how we originally allocated. Okay. So that would be something we won't be able to decide on tonight. We just gave guidance. Okay. And then other things that I had down were the clarification on the Art Center amount to 124. The direction to defer and re-examine the how much of the Life Moves project out of the 2 million would stay in this year's budget based on the council discussion and other evaluation and staff discussions with Life Moves.
So you'd like to leave the 500,000 and
I would
only
definitely
do
like to
2 million,
leave the 500,000 definitely.
the 2 million gap.
Well, just a second. I definitely like to leave the 500,000, the fire safety elements and the fencing. And the question is, beyond that, what should stay in or needs to stay? And then the UNAF to add the 20 or based on clarifications, what it was 25 last year from two sources, essentially the same amount that we contributed as a city last year, regardless of the sources. And the other things, I like referral to explore with Stanford. I don't think we have to put that in motion, do we? We should.
Sure, just for clarity.
Okay, and we'll refer to explore with Stanford eucalyptus fire risk reduction.
Stanford ad hoc.
Yes, to Stanford ad hoc. And anything I'm missing?
I just, go ahead, Julie.
To the youth mental health, I had suggested that we go to recoup the full amount of 200,000 because there is no program attached to this, and I would rather see us deploy these dollars when we have something we're excited about prioritizing to spend it on.
I'd be good with that, but let me ask staff on the things that we're looking at deferring to consideration for mid-year, not obligation. Is it also staff's anticipation that by mid-year they would be able to have more concrete proposals as to what we might or might not do with those funds, as opposed to in some of these that were kind of conceptual set-asides?
I think we can certainly work toward that. There are many things that will be in better focus and probably some of the things that will come up every now and then. But certainly setting that as an expectation is fine.
Good. Okay. Greer?
Ed, following up, you made the loaf bread analogy for the airplane noise. Is that does that apply here as well?
What were you talking about? It was a small loaf. Now we were talking about a much bigger loaf. I'm not quite sure that applies here.
Okay. If not, if not, I'm fine with it.
Let me add that once again, if we saw that we had a need to ramp up at mid-year, we've allocated 75. If things ramp up in need between now and mid-year, and we've spent most of that 75, then there's probably going to be a request for an additional. So if we're under an understanding that we want to keep our momentum going, and that this 75 is intended to do that, if there's greater need, then staff's going to come back and be clear.
He's talking about the youth mental health using the analogy of the
I'm sorry.
airplane noise.
That's what I meant, but I also agree with you just saying.
Okay, well, I got to have loaf, right? Yeah.
I think the distinction here is the desire to really have a better plan forward with respect to youth mental health, and quite frankly, this is my perspective perhaps alone, not create the pressure of spending $100,000 immediately when there's not a strategy behind it. In the case of the airplane noise, I think it's a very different circumstance in which that partial loaf can help us maintain that momentum.
And I know that there are folks right now that are with YCS and others and the county representatives. They're actually having discussions and kind of looking at the package of initiatives that we have not only pure city initiatives, but through our schools. For instance, YCS has a significant county grant on youth connectedness that is applied in the schools, even though it's YCS. And one of the things that I think we need to do a better job of is looking at the package of programs that we have so that we can identify gaps where they may exist, as opposed to kind of ad hoc doing this. So I think there is a need for a more systematic approach, and I think some of our community volunteers are working on that. Okay, let's see. So I rattled off some things. Are we able? I don't know who. Anybody capture what I
think so. Vin, do you have it, or we have it if you want us to share screen?
If you guys could just.
Sure.
Greer?
While they're doing that, I just wanted a clarification based on what kind of staff said when they're doing the staff presentation as far as the referral for the HISRAP allocation, because there was a distinction that you made in the presentation between 2 and 3, items 2 and 3 there, and that. I just wanted to make sure we weren't missing that.
I think if I'm following the chair, he was trying to address slide 5 and the 1 million first, and then we will
We're
need.
talking about just a motion right now.
Got it. Then I'll
Okay.
need additional details for the motion, or we will need.
Okay, so why don't we go ahead and put on the screen what we have so far, and then go into the other elements are on slide 7. So first, it would start with number 1, which is the adoption of the FY24 blah blah, and then we have Finance Committee tentative recommendations. Those are really the things that we've modified. It's staff recommendations with the following modifications, right? Would that be the way we'd frame it? And then we also had some staff referrals. So we break up some of this list that we have here into staff referrals. And we approve the capital plan. But in Greer, you were asking for one more clarification on the HISRAP, which was potential referrals under slide 6. And that's not for this year, that's a future referral, right?
Yep.
And one of the things that I'll just say that when we had this discussion, I think last month, we had been interested in this 1% concept, but we also recognized that from years ago, we had added human services funding that wasn't directly listed under HISRAP. And so we still have a need to look at that more comprehensively under that intention. So I think we do want to have a referral for looking at the future level of both human services funding and HISRAP per se. So maybe we'll just put that as the referral rather than be explicit on saying HISRAP 1%. We need to look at both those things. And then there was a question on the coordinated area plans. Should we simply affirm what really was a council recommendation that we do a referral of the CAP process to the Housing Ad Hoc Committee? Go ahead, Julie.
Well, they've got an italics here, no need to make a referral because staff needs to bring this review forward.
Okay.
So I'm just trying to reconcile that.
All right. And then same thing, really no referral need on the SCAP. Okay, so now I look up and it looks like things have been inserted. Paul?
Can you restate this wrap one more time? I was trying to catch it.
Referral to evaluate human services and HISRAP funding levels on an ongoing basis. Is that okay?
Yeah, as long as we keep the language including possibility of the 1%.
General fund.
Okay,
Don't have to get lost.
yeah. Good. Okay. Anything else? Paul, any other clarifications needed or anybody sees?
Just reading through them real quick.
May I point out that the public comment on UNAF did request 25,000 from us. So I realized 20,000 was in the budget as the one time last time, but the request this time around was 25.
And and we were trying to figure out whether we actually gave them 25 last year from two funds or they only got 20 from a single fund. So because we had 20 there and we were trying to remember whether there might have been a council discretionary fund that made up that difference. And I'm not sure. I think that might be where we got the 25. They got from 2 buckets last year.
Sorry, I was switching my screens, but I had looked it up in Questica. We gave them 20,000 one time last year. The year before that, we had given them 10,000. So it was just 20,000 last year one time.
Okay, so what's the recommendation of the committee?
I'm happy to allocate the 25,000.
Okay, let's go ahead and put it that way. I'm good with that if that's the case. Good. I think it's good too. Okay. All right. Anything else? All right. I will make a motion.
Second.
Good. Any other comments? And Ben, would you call the roll?
Vice Mayor Stone,
Yes.
Chair Burt,
Yes.
Councilmember Lifcott Haynes.
Yes.
The motion carries 3-0.
Great. And I take it this will go on consent. All right. That concludes this item. Kylie, upcoming meetings.
Thank you, Chair Burt. After discussing with the chair, we only had one item for one of your June meetings, which we actually then just turned into an information item. Since you have actually thoroughly reviewed that material already as part of your budget proceedings, it was our Q3 financial status report. So your next finance committee meeting will not be until August. There you go.
Yeah.
So you've done plenty of time over the last month. So thank you to this committee for all your hours and supporting through this budget process. And we will see you in August.
Thank you. Meeting's adjourned.